Hello and welcome to an After Effects tutorial with me, Tim Evans. This has been prepared as part of a Future Representations course for the University of Greenwich. So, let's get started and have a look at what we're doing today. As you can see here, we're animating a famous Archigram image, moving around all these different balloons. We have a car moving in the background, and just a slight bit of perspective. So, what we're going to do is close out of that, and if we jump into Photoshop first, because what we're going to be creating is a layered Photoshop file. So what that means is we take our original image, here we have everything with the lights in the background and all of our balloons, and we are going to slowly cut out all of the different important objects. So we can see in a different layer we have all of our items with the original background, and we've also made a slight change of a background. If we hide everything and just look at the background, we can see we have two versions, one without the people. We have our image, we've removed the lights and a few of the balloons. So what we're going to do now is jump over into After Effects. Now this is the composition that I've created earlier, as you saw on the video, and we're going to be creating something a little bit like this. So to get started, what we're going to do is File, we're going to go New Project, so we start with a blank workspace, and from here what we're going to do is create a new composition. So to do that we can go Composition, New Composition, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a PAL D1 DV widescreen with square pixels, and what that's going to give us is the resolution of 1050 by 576, which I believe is the standard broadcasting and British television, along with our 25 frames per second. And the reason we're choosing these square pixels is so that we don't experience any squishing or stretching when we play it using different media. So we've got the start time code at 0, and we've got the duration at a minute. What we're going to do is change that down to about 15 seconds. And all we have to do is then click OK. So here we have it. What we're going to do is fit that to our screen. And now we need to import our Photoshop file. So we can do that quite easily by coming over to our project window on the left hand side and just double click in the middle. What this does is just bring up our window, and all we have to do is open Archigram layers as we prepared earlier. So we're just going to click import, and what we want to do is we want to import kind and come to Composition, Retain Layer Styles, and make sure Editable Layer Styles is clicked below, and if we just click OK, we will see that it imports its own composition with all of the layers already cut out for us, but we're not going to use that, so we're just going to close that down. We're going to use our comp 1 if we have here, and you can see it's imported a folder. If we click the little arrow next to that, we have all of our layers that was in the original Photoshop file. So quite easily from this, what we want to do is drag our edited background in. So we're going to click O2 background, drag this in, and as we can see it is too big to fit inside of our window. So to get around this, what we're going to do is push S on the keyboard, and as you can see it brings up our scale. So we're just going to drag this down and keep going so that we can fill the frame. With the background sorted, we can just minimize that window and drag in one of our first objects. So to get started, we'll click on one of the balloons, drag this down, and we're just going to drop it above our background layer. And as we can see the balloon in the middle, we're going to drag this over to the side, and what we want to do is scale it down as this is too big. So again, just push the S key, and we're going to drag the scale down so it's more of a reasonable size. And then we want to move it into our starting position, as we're going to animate this moving upwards and downwards. And what we're going to do is either push P or click the little drop down arrows. So we have the position, and with our time frame set to 0, we're going to click the little stopwatch right next to position here. So what we can do then is, with that point saved at the 0 point, we're going to move out to about 3 seconds. And at 3 seconds, we're going to move the down. And we can do that either by adjusting the Y value next to position, or we can click and drag and move that to where we want. Okay, so we're just going to leave it there. And as we can see, we've now created a movement across that point. So what we want to do is, if we push spacebar to play, we'll see that it moves down and it reaches that point and stops. So as we want it to go back up again, the easiest way to do this is to click on our original starting point, Control C, and if we go to 6 seconds, we can go Control V and paste that point just up there. And if we want to repeat this again, we can select the next 2, move over again to 9 seconds and paste. And what we're doing is creating this up and down movement. And we just want to repeat that until we get all the way to the end, like we have there. Now, to add a bit more depth, what we want to do is change the scale slightly. So we're going to come back to our 0. We're going to click the keyframe next to scale, and we don't need this to change quite as much. But what we want to do is come along to this second keyframe, and we're just going to bring the scale up ever so slightly, and then come along to the next one and bring it back down, and then repeat again. So if we come right back to the start and push space, we can see, although you don't notice the scale very much, it is changing ever so slightly. And to add a little bit more onto that, again bringing back to the start and clicking on the rotation tool. From there, now that we've saved that point, we can go all the way to the end and increase the rotation all the way up to about 360 degrees. We can click on the point and just change that, and what it's done is it's made one rotation and back to 0 degrees. So if we bring that all the way back, we can now see it is rotating. So what we're going to do is leave that as it is, and we're going to do the same for balloon number 2. And we want to just drag this on top of there. And as you can see, this is a slightly different one, and we're going to drag that up next to it. And a quick way to use the same idea that we've done here and to copy all of these points, what we're going to do is simply highlight all of our keyframes there and Control C to copy, and we're going to click on this other ball and just Control V. And what you notice is, if we push our down arrow and transform, what we have is the exact same points. Now the only problem with this is obviously it is on top. So what we want to do is just select our layer 7, move this over to the side. See, now the problem we have here is that it's just moving these first points. So to get around this, what we want to do is select all of these points, and with everything selected, just drag that over to the side. And if we scroll through there, now we can see that this is going up and down. Okay, so what we're going to do now is do the same, but with another balloon. So we're going to collect a balloon number 3, drag that in on top of all the others, it comes in the middle. And now to clean up our workspace a little bit, we're going to select these other 2 balloons, and we're just going to push U twice, and that will hide everything and just bring us to the default view. So selecting our 3rd balloon again, what we want to do with this one is, as we saw in the start, we're going to drag it off to the side, just so we can see it ever so slightly, push the S to bring the scale down, and to make it about the same size as the others. So what we're going to do with this one is animate it along a path, coming up along this point and floating off into the air. So to do this, we just hit the P for position. We're going to set our time to 0, click the stopwatch, and what we're going to do is come forward a few seconds to about 2 seconds, and we're just going to drag it to its new point, and we're going to do the same again at 4 seconds, and as you'll see, it's creating this arc. So we want to move it about the same distance on each time, and if we now scrub through the timeline, you can see it rolls along and up and disappears up there. Now what we can do is, as we want it to come back down again, but without having to animate it as we did before, what we're going to do is select these points, move it over to 8 frames and just paste. And what we can do with 3 frames still selected is right click and go to keyframe assistant, add time reverse keyframes, and what that's going to do is essentially mirror the time frame. So as we have, it starts up, it moves upwards, flies in up off the screen, and then it comes back down in the reverse order. Now what we could do is just copy the first 2 frames, and we're just going to paste them there, so that towards the end it's still moving. Okay, and there we have it. So to add a bit more dimension to that, what we're going to do is hit the R key, and we're going to keyframe the rotation. So keyframe it at 0, and we're going to come right the way up so that it's at its highest point. We're going to rotate it round about 180 degrees, and then we're going to go back down till it's off the screen, and while it's off the screen we're going to push it back to about 0, and just to finish it off at a few degrees so that it starts moving there. And what we get there is, if we preview that, we have it rotating ever so slightly, zooming up and coming back down again. Now what we want to actually do is speed up the rotation a bit, so we're going to come to the middle, and what we're going to do is double click on this central keyframe, and we're going to put it to about 270 degrees, click OK, and now when we preview that we can see it's rolling slightly better. Okay, so with the balloons in place, what we're going to do now is put the lights in. So if we're going to drag beam 1 in and just drop that and push S for scale, I'm going to bring this down, and now because we want to rotate it around this point, if we bring down our options here and rotate it, as we can see it rotates around the center and not the point at which the light starts, which is what we want. So what we have to do to fix that is use the anchor point. So we're just going to drag the anchor point, going to drag it down to the about 0, and then we're going to bring up the Y so that we get this central anchor point coming from the start, and what we can do now is move this around and the anchor point will stay in this area. So we're going to bring this up, we're going to put the light on top of there, and what we're going to do, as we've done before, is keyframe the rotation, come forwards in time to about 6 seconds, and we're going to rotate it across the screen and going to come back again. And we can just keep doing that until we get what we want. So if we just preview that quickly, as we can see, it's rotating around its central point across the screen. Now what I want to do is I want to have it behind these balloons. So to do that, all we have to do is drag this top layer down and set it above the background but behind the balloons. And what we get there is the balloons in front and the light panning in the back. So what we're going to do is just repeat that step for beam number 2. Drag that in, push S for scale, and we're going to bring the scale down, and this one we're going to put on this side of the bridge, and do the same again, push A for the anchor point, and we're going to set that so that it come in from the origin and we can then just drag it back down into position and push R to bring up our rotation, and this one is going to rotate a lot slower. So we have set our 0 point, and we're just going to come to the end and just pan it across ever so slightly. And now what we have is this light moving slowly, this one moving quickly, and there we go. So because these have very sharp edges, it's not looking particularly appealing at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a blur. So to do that, all we have to do is come over to our effects and presets, type in blur, and scroll down to blur and sharpen, and then radial blur, and we can just click and drag it onto that light there. Now what we can see is that it gives us an extra point in the middle, and it blurs either end. Now what we want to do is click on this central point and drag it to match our origin. And what we can see now is we have this radial blur coming out from this point. Now this is a bit harsh, so because this one's moving very slowly, we're just going to bring that down to 2. And now we can see it's got slightly softer edges. So to copy that onto the other one, we're just going to click on our radial blur effect, Control C, and we can select our other light and just paste it on there. And there we have that moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this left hand side one, and we're going to put a different colour on it. So what we're going to do is come to our effects and presets and type tint. So we're going to have colour correction and tint. We're just going to drag that on top of that. As you see, it's made it slightly whiter. All we want to do is map to white, and I'm going to select that, and we want to make it a sort of yellow that matches these balloons next to it. So we need to bring it up a bit, and that's probably quite a good effect. And obviously we could also change with the amount to tint, but we want that quite strong to be this very vibrant Archigram image. So there we have some different colour lights. We have our balloons floating around, and what we need to do now is drag in our couple. So to come, if we on this effects window, what we can do is click the little arrows, if not click project, and we want to find our couple as we've named. Obviously naming your Photoshop file makes quite a good thing when you come to putting it in, and we're just going to push S for scale, and we're just going to scale them down and drop them in the scene there. Obviously this is a very loose fitting image, and therefore we can drop things where we want them. If you want to be a bit more precise, you can obviously then use your position key to fine tune all the locations. So what we're going to do with these is just put a very subtle pan or Ken Burns effect on them, just to give the image a little bit of perspective. And there we have a couple just moving very slowly to the side. Okay, so with that in force, what we're going to do is add a mask. So, because I want to add a car moving in the background, as we saw earlier, what I've done is I've found another car. What I'm going to use is this GIF, and just import. And what I'm going to do is drag this in, and just scale it down and push it to the back to make it look like it fits into the scene. Now obviously you can see it's still got this white border, so what I'm going to do is move it to composition so that I can mask out the surroundings. And so to do that, all we have to do is right click on our image over here and go pre-compose, and we want to leave all attributes in and just click OK. And what we're going to do is then double click on here, and we get our car. Now because of the Archigram style, we don't really want to use the transparency much, so what we're going to do is mask out around this image. So to do this, we're going to click our pen tool up at the top, and very loosely going to mask around the outside. Now because this is an Archigram image, we want to leave the shadow in without any transparency, and we're just going to click around the outside of the car. And obviously a quick way around this would be to use a PNG file, which would have already removed this white area around the outside. But as we can see, what we have now is a little masks tab, and we have our mask, which we can see is cutting around the outside. Obviously you can click and drag any of these individual points and move them around to make sure we're fitting the outside of the car correctly. So if we jump back into our composition 1, we can now see that we have our car, and we just want to click back on our cursor tool, and we're going to bring it back and push the S again and scale it down so that it sort of fits into the scene. And what we want to do is then keyframe its position, keyframe, and come to the end, and we want to we're going to include the scale this time. So if we download all of them, and we're going to keyframe the scale, and we don't have to worry about the rotation or opacity. So we're just going to come right to the end, and we're going to move our car along the axis and bring the scale up so it's roughly a similar size to the car right next to us. And if we just play that back, we can see it moving along. However, it is cutting through our cars. Now, one way around this would be either to create a mask on this layer to mask out these cars, or alternatively, as we've already cut the cars out, what we're going to do is drag them into the scene, and we just need to scale them down to the same factor as this. So what we're going to do is cheat a little bit, and if we just minimize all this to clean our stuff out, we're going to come to our background, and our scale is at 38. So on our car, what we want to do is push the S, and we can just type in 38 and then match the position up as close as possible. And now we have, because this layer is on top, we can see our car moving behind. Now the only thing I'm going to fix is I'm going to bring the scale down just a little bit more on our car, right at the start, just so that it blends in a little bit better. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add an effect, and another way to add an effect is come up to our effects tab up here, and obviously I have a lot more than you may have, but what you can do is go to color correction, and if we add levels, what we can then do is just bring down the car just a little bit and just play around with the figures just so that we can get it quite this vibrant colour. Another option that we could add would be posterize. So what I'm going to do is search for it. So I'm just going to type posterize, and what I'm going to do is stylize posterize and drag that, because I can't get it onto there. I'm just going to drag it over to the side, and what we can obviously do is change the number of levels. Obviously the higher you go, the more colours posterize is using. So we're going to drag this down, and at about 4 we get this very interesting set of colours. And so there we go. If we zoom out, what we can do is click fit, and if we push spacebar to preview it, here we have a car moving, we have the balloons moving up and down, and our lights panning in the background. So is there anything else that we could do? What we could do is we could add an effect to the whole image, and all to do that we're going to go composition, layer, new, and we're going to add an adjustment layer. And what this allows us to do is add effects that will apply to everything that is below it. So what we could do, if we come up to effect, and we're going to go to color correction, and from here we could go to curves and bring up our curves. Obviously because it is Archigram, we want quite contrasty colours. So you're just going to push the colours there and we'll get this slightly better pop coming out. And what we could also add is, let's see, so come down and we could go with, we don't need to add a blur to the whole lot because obviously that will unfocus everything. We could add a slight distort. And let's see if there is anything worth using. We could add a CC lens, and as at the start this doesn't look quite appealing, but what we can do is bring the size up, and if we just bring it down slightly, obviously it's just going to warp the edges ever so slightly, which gives us a bit more of a slightly abstract image. Now the only other thing that I've just noticed is as our couple move along, the car is still in front. So what we just want to do is find our couple down here, and we just want to drag them up to the top. And there we have it. If we just hit play, there we can see our final film. So with everything set, what we need to do now is export it. So to do that, what we're going to do is selecting our comp one. We are then going to go into composition and add to render queue. So this brings up this window at the bottom. What we're going to do is click on output module and lossless. Then we're going to go down to QuickTime and format options. We want to make sure our video codec is set to H.264. And what that is going to do is you're going to compress our final image to a more suitable size that's ready to upload to YouTube. So we don't have to change anything else, just click OK. All we have to do is select somewhere to save it. So I have my video out file, and I'm just going to call it Archigram tutorial. Save. I'm going to overwrite one, but obviously you will have a new one. And then we're just going to click render. And as we can see, it's doing it very quickly. So we're just going to wait for that to finish. And we get the little noise to say that it's done. And what we can do is then open that, and we click output module, or you could just navigate to it in Explorer. And as we can see here, what we want to do is open that in VLC. And here we have our output image. So we have everything moving around. And what we could do is add sound or any other effects later on. So, I've been Tim Evans. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.